Good morning, Ms. Norman. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the witness that we intend calling this morning is Mr. Jonathan Thekiso. That he stated there's two bundles before you, Mr. Chair. They would be marked Exhibit CC 17.1 and Exhibit CC 17.2 to CC 18.
Just repeat that.
It's 17, Exhibit CC 17.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one, he has two statements. The one is in that bundle, and the other one is in Exhibit CC 17.2. That's where his supplementary statement is.
I see. Oh, why is it written in such small letters, 17.1 and 17.2? You see, I just see on this one CC 17, and I'm trying to look for CC 17.1. Then I realize after some time that.
Or they used a smaller font, yes.
Yes, yes. What page is his statement?
His statement in CC 17.1 is the very first statement. It will be under the divider marked CC 17. And it starts from page 1, the statement itself, and then the rest are annexures. Statement, starts from page 1 up to page 10, and then the remainder are annexures.
Well, under divider 17, I have got an SABC letter.
What does the letter say, Mr. Chairman?
Under divider 17 in CC 17.1, I've got a letter with the letterheads of SABC, not a statement.
No, I think, Mr. Chairman, you're looking, if you could look at the file divider.
Okay, let's
file divider 6.
Let's start afresh. 17.1, is that the correct one?
That is the correct file.
Okay, all right.
And then if you turn that file, you will find a divider that's marked CC 17.1.
Yes. Okay. Right at the beginning.
Yes.
Okay. No, that's fine. I thought it was 17.
That is then his initial statement. And then a supplementary statement is in CC 17.2, which is in the lever arch file marked CC 17.2 to CC 18.
Yeah. Is there another statement of his there?
Yes.
And where do I find it? Is it right at the top as well?
It will be on top, yes. Sorry, let me just give you the correct page, sorry.
Okay, that's a supplementary statement.
Yes. It starts from page 334.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, before we start, I am going to ask you to, in regard to each witness, to mention, to indicate what each witness's evidence, under what part of each witness's evidence will fall in the terms of reference, so that I'm satisfied that the witness is going to be giving evidence that falls under the terms of reference. I'm just going to take some time to refresh our memory about the terms of reference, because I must make sure that the evidence that I hear falls within our terms of reference. The terms of reference read as follows. A judicial commission of inquiry, the commission, is hereby appointed in terms of Section 84(2)(f) of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, 1996. The commission is appointed to investigate matters of public and national interest concerning allegations of state capture, corruption, and fraud. Then they say, under 1, the commission shall inquire into, make findings, report on, and make recommendations concerning the following, guided by the Public Protector's State of Capture Report, the Constitution, relevant legislation, policies, and guidelines, as well as the order of the North Gauteng High Court of 14 December 2017, under case number 91139/2016. 1.1. Whether and to what extent and by whom attempts were made through any form of inducement or for any gain of whatsoever nature to influence members of the national executive, including deputy ministers, office bearers, and or functionaries employed by or office bearers of any state institution or organs of state or directors of the boards of SOEs. In particular, the Commission must investigate the veracity of allegations that former Deputy Minister of Finance, Mr. Mcebisi Jonas, and Ms. Mentor were offered cabinet positions by the Gupta family. That's 1.1. 1.2, whether the President had any role in the alleged offers of cabinet positions to Mr. Mcebisi Jonas and Ms. Mentor by the Gupta family as alleged. 1.3, whether the appointment of any member of the National Executive, functionary, and or office bearer was disclosed to the Gupta family or any other unauthorized person before such appointments were formally made and or announced, and if so, whether the President or any member of the National Executive is responsible for such conduct. 1.4, whether the President or any member of the present or previous members of his National Executive, including deputy ministers or public official or employee of any state-owned entities breached or violated the Constitution or any relevant ethical code or legislation by facilitating the unlawful awarding of tenders by SOEs or any organ of state to benefit the Gupta family or any other family or individual or corporate entity doing business with government or any organ of state. 1.5, the nature and extent of corruption, if any, in the awarding of contracts, tenders to companies, business entities, or organizations by public entities listed under Schedule 2 of the Public Finance Management Act No. 1 of 1999 as amended. 1.6, whether there were any irregularities, undue enrichment, corruption, and undue influence in the awarding of contracts, mining licenses, government advertising in the New Age newspaper, and any other government services in the business dealings of the Gupta family with government departments and SOEs. 1.7, whether any member of the National Executive, and including deputy ministers, unlawfully or corruptly or improperly intervened in the matter of the closing of banking facilities for Gupta-owned companies. 1.8, whether any advisors in the Ministry of Finance were appointed without proper procedures, in particular, and as alleged in the complaint to the Public Protector, whether 2 senior advisors who were appointed by Minister Des van Rooyen to the National Treasury were so appointed without following proper procedures. 1.9, the nature and extent of corruption, if any, in the awarding of contracts and tenders to companies, business entities, or organizations by government departments, agencies, and entities. In particular, whether any member of the National Executive, including the President, public official, functionary of any organ of state, influenced the awarding of tenders to benefit themselves, their families, or entities in which they held a personal interest. These terms of reference may be added to, varied, or amended from time to time. So we need to always bear in mind what the terms of reference of the Commission are, and I just want to make sure that we fall within.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. The evidence that we are leading is a continuation of what we started. We started this last year with the evidence of Dr. Kaufman, who had identified what state capture is. And he had testified that if you capture the media, that is state capture. We continued with that evidence through the evidence of Mr. Sundaram, who indicated the attempts to capture the TV stations. So this is a continuation of that. And Chair would recall that Chair has always told us that he needs to answer 3 questions. The first question is, what happened? The second question is, how did it happen? And the third question is, what must be done in order to make sure that it does not recur? Now, state capture, as it is, this phenomenon doesn't come, as the Chair would know, in a bundle identified as state capture. We are adducing evidence to show how the attempts were made, and that will fall squarely within 1.1 of the terms of reference, because there's reference, in fact, the preamble that the Chair has read, the Commission is appointed to investigate matters of public and national interest concerning allegations of state capture, corruption, and fraud. So we are dealing with state capture, largely, or attempts to capture the media. And that is what we started, as I indicated earlier. And if one looks at 1.1, that is based on the Public Protector's report, state capture report. Whether and to what extent and by whom attempts were made through any form of inducement or for any gain of whatsoever nature to influence members of the national executive, including deputy ministers, office bearers, and of functionaries employed by or office bearers of any state institutions or organs of state or directors or boards of SOEs. And then in particular. So the point that we are making, Chair, is that if there are influences of editorial policies, there are influences that direct the way in which news must be broadcast to the public, that is a matter of national interest. And Chair had allowed this evidence of Mr. Sundaram tied in with that of Dr. Kaufman. And we believe that these are matters that are critical, and they will show, for instance, this witness is going to show how in that whole process of executing this animal called state capture, how skilled professionals were asked to leave. You will find, for example, an example of a person who's told, go home when the contract still has a period of 5 years to run. But he's told, no, you can go home. SABC will waive all of its rights. You can go home, and then we'll simply pay you for that. That is what this witness's evidence is going to be about the consistent manner in which executives that could have perhaps protected the SABC from the situation which we described the past 2 days. All of those employees, we were asked, long before their terms expired, you go, you sit at home, and then in the process they will employ an acting person, and in the process they pay 12 million, 5 million, 4 million. So that to us, Chair, is relevant because it demonstrates how some of the actions that are going to come later, tied in with what we are demonstrating now, would, at the end of the day, enable us, as the evidence leaders, to make the submissions to you that indeed this fell within the terms of reference 1.1, and it was indeed state capture, as these witnesses are going to deal with.
Well, you see, Mr. Sundaram's evidence was tied in with the project of the establishment of the new age and N7. And there is a specific reference to the new age in the terms of reference. Yes. So that was fine. It's connected with the Gupta family, and there's specific reference to it in the terms of reference. Now, it's not every wrongdoing that may have been happening in various state-owned entities or government departments that falls within the terms of reference. It's got to be wrongdoing that can be connected with the terms of reference. As I was reading them, one is connection with state capture. Two is, to a very large extent, corruption and fraud that's connected with contracts, the awarding of contracts and tenders. So in other words, there may well be a lot of wrongdoing that may have been happening in government departments and state-owned entities, which was bad and which should be dealt with, but which might fall outside the terms of reference of the Commission. So it's important, therefore, that when we look at wrongdoing, we are able to link it, to check whether it links with the terms of reference. Now, I mean, I have read all the terms of reference. Most of them are linked to tenders and doing business, outsiders doing business with organs of state or organs of, or cabinet ministers, deputy ministers, other functionaries and office bearers in government, in state-owned entities and government departments, doing certain wrong things in order to favor certain individuals with government business and so on. So I'm keen that we look at it properly. You say this witness evidence will fall under 1.1, is that right?
That is right, yes.
Now, you know, 1.1 appears to have a problem, and you might be able to assist me whether there is a problem. Before where it says in particular, and then it talks about Mr. Mcebisi Jonas and Ms. Mentor, before that sentence, it doesn't appear to be complete. It's whether and to what extent and by whom attempts were made through any form of inducement or for any gain of whatsoever nature to influence members of the national executive, including deputy ministers, office bearers, and or functionaries employed by or office bearers of any state institution or organ of state or directors of the boards of SOEs. Then it doesn't say attempts to influence them to do what?
Yes. That is, Chair would recall that right at the outset when the commission commenced, as the legal team, we had made submissions on the terms of reference as to how they should be interpreted, how far should they go, and to what extent can they be limited if they have to be limited. So that is the challenge you have. For example, if you take the SABC, we are going to deal with the contracts. We are going to call one of the former ministers to come and explain to you how certain contracts were entered into. But we are going to also show you how skilled people were removed in order to enable people who were not qualified to be put in those places so as to enable state capture to happen. And unfortunately, without us doing that, we are not going to be able to assist you when at the end of the day you have to submit a report and deal with what is it that happened within the SABC.
You see, if you lead evidence that shows wrongdoing that was connected with the awarding of contracts, and that wrongdoing would have been against the policies of the SABC procurement procedures, that should be fine.
Yes, it will be. Yes.
That might not, you might not even need 1.1, which doesn't seem to have a verb.
Yes, yes,
you know?
yes.
It might fall under 1.4, whether the president or any member of the present or previous members of his national executive or public official or employee of any state-owned entities breached or violated the Constitution or any relevant ethical code or legislation by facilitating the unlawful awarding of tenders by SOEs or any organ of state to benefit the Gupta family or any other family or individual or corporate entity doing business with government or organ of state. If you link it to the awarding of contracts, it should fall under that.
It will, Chair. The difficulty is, one, with the evidence as it progresses, I cannot take this witness's evidence individually and say this evidence on its own will show you state capture. I have to link it with the other evidence that you are going to lead. And then you will see how the process itself unfolded and how we get to the point of the contracts. Because in the establishment, you need people who are going to facilitate procurement. And we're going to show you how people were removed and who was replaced and how that process unfolded right up to the stage then when contracts were entered into, when policies were changed. So that is the process that you are following. Yes.
As long as in the end there would be that link. If there will be.
Yeah.
But I would like if I could be given a memo that in due course that will show that in the end this is how the witnesses will link up.
Yes,
their evidence will link up.
Yes, Chair. No, I think there is a memo that I had submitted to you, Chair, but I can update that memo.
If you can update that memo.
Yeah,
but as we proceed, I mean, I'll take it that that's what you are planning to do, to end up linking with what other witnesses will say.
Yes.
But that the point is always that you are looking at how certain wrong things were done in order to influence the awarding of contracts and business to certain individuals or companies and so on.
Yes.
Is that understanding
It will
fine?
lead, Chair, I wouldn't be leading this evidence if it didn't tie up with that.
No.
That is an assurance that I can give you.
I must be satisfied.
I know, Chair.
I must be satisfied.
Yes.
You satisfy yourself, but I must also be satisfied.
No, true.
Yes.
But also, Chair, in the rules, you've made it our obligation as a legal team,
yes,
the responsibility to place evidence before you. And I would not place any evidence that I regarded as irrelevant to the terms of reference. And the evidence yes.
No, Ms. Norman.
No.
You must satisfy yourself that
Yes.
the evidence is relevant.
Yes.
But the fact that you have satisfied yourself doesn't mean that I'm satisfied.
Yes. Chair has not heard the evidence. That is the
Yes,
difference.
but before it's led, I must satisfy myself that it will be relevant.
Chair, I had
Because
placed,
I shouldn't allow evidence that's not relevant.
No, true. I accept that, Chair. But I had placed this evidence before Chair last week, Wednesday. And as I have explained to Chair, this evidence is relevant because it shows that the enablers of state capture had decided to remove skilled people.
Ms. Norman.
Yes.
Ms. Norman, I must be satisfied that the evidence that is being led is relevant and falls within the terms of reference.
Yes.
I must make a ruling whether it should be led or it should not be led.
Yes.
You are assisting me to do this job.
Yes.
And you are doing quite well, but I still need to be satisfied. So that's why it's important, if I have questions, that you make submissions to say, we submit it's relevant because of A, B, C, D,
Yes.
D. And I listen to what you have to say. If I'm persuaded, I agree. If I'm not persuaded, I don't agree.
Thank you, Chair. Chair,
Okay.
yes. No, I hear you, Chair. I have made submissions that this
Yes.
evidence is relevant because it's going to tie in with other evidence that is going to show ultimately how the contracts were handled.
No. In principle, that should be fine. So do give me that memorandum that you say you will update. But as we go along with every witness,
Yes.
we must just keep in mind that we are within the terms of reference.
Yes.
And I accept that sometimes it may be difficult to show with the relevance with regard to a particular witness, because the relevance might become clearer when another witness comes
Yes.
later on to give that. That I accept,
Yes.
that it might happen. So, and to that extent, you might be aware of some witnesses who are going to come,
Yes.
who might clarify certain things. But it's important that throughout we keep at the back of our mind that we want to fall within the terms of reference.
Yes. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Yes.
All right then. Let's
Thank you.
let's then have the witness sworn in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please state your full names for the record.
Jonathan Thekiso.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
I don't.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
I do.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. You may start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Thekiso, please, could you switch on your mic? Thank you. You have two files next to you. The one is marked Exhibit CC 17.1, and the other one is marked CC 17.2. You see that? We are going to start with the one that's marked CC 17.1. If you could just place that one in front of you.
Let's first admit it.
Admit them. Yes, thank you, Chair.
The liver arch file containing the against a sworn affidavit, Ms. Lulama.
Yes, it is written sworn affidavit, Mr. Chairman, but at the end, Chair, you will find that it's just signed.
It's not a.
No, it is actually, this one it is an affidavit, yes.
The liver arch file containing the affidavit of Mr. Jonathan Thekiso will be marked Exhibit CC 17.1.
Thank you, Chair.
And the liver arch file containing Mr. Jonathan Thekiso's supplementary
Affidavit.
is a statement of affidavit.
It's a supplementary affidavit, Chair.
Affidavit will be marked Exhibit CC 17.2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Thekiso, is it correct that you are employed by the SABC?
That's correct, Chair.
In what position are you employed?
I am the Group Executive of Human Resources.
Thank you. What do you deal with within human resources?
My role is to provide strategic direction and leadership by aligning the HR strategy to the corporate plan of the SABC to ensure that the organization can deliver on the mandate. Secondly, my role entails sustaining an environment that's characterized by healthy, competent staff members in order to ensure that the SABC becomes an employer of choice. But quite critically, we work very closely with line management to make sure that they can deliver on their objectives with a view to the SABC achieving the mandate.
Thank you. And I would imagine that before you do that, you yourself, you must be able to say, I'm qualified enough to be able to tackle this job.
I believe so, Chair.
Yes. Could you just place your qualifications before the chairperson, please?
Chairperson, I matriculated at Moletsane High School in Soweto.
Well, I see that he starts like he starts the way I would start.
You'll start, yes.
In 1982. I have a BA Social Sciences degree from the University of Cape Town. I have a postgraduate diploma in management, the HR stream, from Wits University. I have an advanced executive program from UNISA School of Business Leadership. I also have a leadership development program, which was co-facilitated by the University of Cape Town and Wits University. I also have an executive financial management program from Wits University.
Thank you. Before you joined the SABC, where were you employed?
I was employed in both the private and public sector, City of Johannesburg. I've worked for telecom directories. I've also worked for Deloitte. I've worked for Vodacom. And at Vodacom, I had an opportunity to take assignments, and I worked in Ghana, as well as an assignment in the UK.
Yes.
And in all instances, it was in an HR environment.
Yes, thank you very much. So then you've just told us what your obligations are as the head of human resources. You were asked by the investigators of the commission to go through the contracts of the persons that had left the SABC, yes, and especially where there were agreements of separation. between those people and the SABC.
Yes.
And you are just going to take the chairperson through those to show how these people left. But your assessment of all these contracts, as you were asked by the investigators of the commission, what was revealed by the contracts and the manner in which they were entered into? Just roughly, without now pinpointing to specific cases, we're going to deal with that.
What was revealed as we were going through the contracts was that people did not want to leave the organization. And they, in most instances, and there were agreements for them to leave the organization on the basis that they were paid, in lieu of their contracts. For instance, somebody might have had 2 more years to run in their contract. They were basically told to leave the organization on the basis of payment amounting to the balance of the contract. So our assessment is that, all in all, people still wanted to work for the SABC, people still wanted to contribute to the SABC. But because of reasons we don't know, they were essentially asked to leave the organization on the basis of particular payments.
Yes. And then, as an HR, I would regard you as an HR expert, given the years that you and the places that you've been dealing with this. Ordinarily, if a person, if there is a dispute between the employer and the employee, I would imagine that would be resolved by a disciplinary hearing.
Correct.
And you have come across instances where there would be a disciplinary hearing, and before the SABC is vindicated on whether or not it is in the wrong, it was in the wrong, or it was correct in what it was doing, then there is a settlement, parting ways. Sometimes that follows even an order from the CCMA that would vindicate the SABC.
That is quite correct. And in some instances, people would have gone through a disciplinary inquiry, and the ruling of that inquiry would be that the person ought to be dismissed. But instead of the dismissal taking effect, the organization preferred to enter into a settlement agreement, and the person basically leaves the organization as if they'd resigned. And in addition to that, they get paid a settlement figure amount.
Yes. And you make, you say you don't find conclusively that there was purging, but you say the indications were there. What is your understanding of purging employees?
My understanding of purging employees is to basically get them out of the way, for reasons they may not be aware of, or for reasons that are known only by the employer or by the person who is actually getting rid of that particular employee.
Yes. And I'd like to just take you...
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Shay.
Isn't purging where the employer or somebody in a higher position wants you out of the company or department for an illegitimate reason? In other words, isn't the position that there has to be an illegitimate reason? If I say, I think your health is no longer, your health doesn't allow you to give us 100% in terms of what you are capable of doing, and I would rather let you go and let me get somebody who can still give us 100%. That wouldn't be purging in the sense in which it is normally understood, isn't it?
Correct, Chair. But if the justification for wanting to get rid of somebody is the fact that there's a problem with their health, of course, there are mechanisms within the organization through which we can take the person to ascertain the validity of that assertion surrounding the health of the individual. But if there's nothing wrong with the individual, and they get told that there's a problem with your health, and as a result of a problem with your health, we think that you might serve a better purpose at home. If that's the case, then that amounts to purging. Because in essence, you have not advanced justifiable reasons as to why this individual has to get out of the way.
You see, the way I see purging, and I want you to tell me how you see it, is that there has to be an illegitimate reason, and maybe illegitimate is too wide, an illegitimate motive, maybe, because if I'm just wrong in understanding what procedure I must follow, but I'm acting in good faith, I've got nothing against you, I'm just wrong in understanding what is required, I might have difficulty understanding that to be purging. But if I think you are a troublemaker because you keep on asking too many questions on things where I think you shouldn't be asking too many questions, you must just allow things to happen, and those are wrong things that I want to happen. And I think you think you are clever. That's separate. If you are a trade unionist and you are always giving me problems because you insist on the rights of workers being respected and all of that, and that's the reason why I want you out, I think that would be purging. It's an illegitimate reason. If I think you belong to a wrong political party, wrong according to me, and I only want in that position somebody who belongs to a certain political party, that's for me on the face of it purging, you know. If you are standing in my way because I want that tender to be given to so and so, and you are insisting that it will only be given to whoever legitimately wins the bid, that's purging for me. You understand?
Yes.
But if I think that in your position, I think the performance you give me, the best you can give me is about 60%, but I think I want somebody who can give me 80%, and I discuss that openly. It doesn't appear to me that it might be purging. I just want somebody who can do better than you are doing. You understand?
Yes. Yes,
Are you more or less in agreement with these examples that I'm giving? If not, just indicate where you have a different understanding and share with me your perspective.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in total agreement with the examples the Chair is giving, but I also want to highlight and impress the fact that in most instances, in as far as the employees who are dealing with are concerned, their departure from the organization was for mostly illegitimate reasons, and therefore amount to purging.
No, then I'm very interested in that. But if the reasons are not illegitimate, I might not be interested. But where the point is the reasons were illegitimate, then I'm quite interested. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. May I take you to page 5 of Exhibit 17.1? I beg your pardon, to page 38. I beg your pardon.
Page 38.
Yes, 38.
Got it, Chair.
Thank you. This is one of the person who was once employed by the SABC, Mr. Felity.
Yes.
I'm sorry, did you say page 5?
Page 38, I beg your pardon, Chair. Initially I said 5, I mean this is page 38.
Yes.
Thank you. Could you just read that letter into the record so that we can deal with the matters that the chairperson has raised with you?
Contract of employment between the SABC and Dingan Feliti, that's the subject.
Yes.
Number one, the above matter has reference. Number two, as you are aware, you are employed by the SABC on a fixed-term contract basis, and your fixed-term contract of employment with the SABC will expire by a fraction of time on 31st August 2018.
Sorry, before you move, the letter is dated?
The letter is dated the 19th of April 2016. Sorry, Chair.
Okay. So this was almost a period of 2 years before the expiry of that contract?
Correct, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Please continue.
Number three, you are hereby advised that the SABC will not be renewing or extending your contract, your fixed-term contract of employment upon termination thereof on 31st from Friday 22nd April 2016. You are not required to report for duty and or provide services to the SABC, and the SABC will be under no obligation to and will therefore not provide or assign any work or services to you. Number five, the SABC will, in relation to the remainder of your contract period, pay you the remuneration as provided for in your fixed-term contract of employment, payable as a once-off lump sum. This includes payment in lieu of accrued annual leave, if any. All payments will be subject to the tax laws of the Republic of South Africa. Number six, the SABC will deduct and or set off the amount due to you, the value of any outstanding loans and or debts that are repayable and or due to the SABC. 7, you will be required to hand over all SABC property and assets back to the SABC on or before 22nd April 2016 at 1500 hours to the Human Resources Manager Group Services. This includes your access card, laptop, computer, and 3G card, as well as your forwarding address and medical aid card or cards. Number 8, due to the SABC having opted to discharge its full payment obligations to you upfront, you will, with effect from the 1st of May 2016, be responsible for your own pension fund and medical aid arrangements. Number 9, please note that the provisions relating to confidentiality in terms of your fixed-term contract of employment are and remain applicable. We request that you comply therewith, which includes keeping this letter and the terms contained herein confidential. Number 10, we would like to take this opportunity to wish you everything of the best in your future endeavors.
So then this person was given from the letter is written the 19th, and the person was given about 3 days to leave the organization.
Correct.
Ms. Norman, I'm sorry. Is there a particular reason why you don't mention the name of the person?
I beg your pardon. No reason, Chair. Mr. Feliti, I beg your pardon. It's Mr. Dingan Feliti. I did mention it initially, yes. Sorry, Mr. Feliti then was given 3 days from the 19th to the 22nd of April, 2016.
Correct.
And there is no reason except to say that the SABC itself has decided not to continue with the employment.
Correct.
Would you regard this, what is contained in paragraph 4, would you say this was a legitimate or illegitimate reason advanced to any employee for terminating employment?
I would say it's illegitimate.
And it was, one would say...
Well, Ms. Norman, no reason is provided in paragraph 4 or anywhere in the letter, isn't it?
No, Chair, no reason except to say I'm using my own prerogative. Yes, so that's basically...
Yeah.
Yes, there's no reason.
A decision was taken by the SABC that it could do without I assume it's Mr. Feliti. And that it would pay him in full for the remainder of his contract, which was more than 2 years.
Correct.
The letter doesn't say whether the SABC no longer needs anybody to do the job that Mr. Feliti was doing.
It doesn't.
It doesn't say. And one would have understood if the position was that there is no longer any work for him to do. Lawyers might argue about whether or not in that event he should be given the whole amount for the rest of the period, but at least one could say that's the reason. But this letter doesn't say anything like that. That's your understanding as well?
That's my understanding, Chair.
Yeah. At the time of this letter, were you in this position at SABC, and therefore would you have known about the circumstances surrounding this letter? I ask that question because sometimes human resources would be consulted when people's contracts are being terminated.
No, Chair. At the time of the termination of Mr. Dingan Feliti, I was not within the SABC. This happened in 2016, and I joined the SABC in 2018.
Oh, okay, all right. But being in the Human Resources Department, have you had a chance to look at the personnel file relating to Mr. Feliti, if it is still being kept, and see whether there is anything that would give us an understanding as to why the SABC took this decision?
No, Chair. The only time I came into contact with this documentation was when we were preparing the documents.
For the commission?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay. So your knowledge is confined to what's in the letter?
That is
in terms of the circumstances?
That is quite correct, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair. And then after you dealt with each and every employee that left during that period and where they were settled, oh, sorry, maybe let's finish Mr. Feliti. And you will see that at page 49, Chair, if I may, not 49, if I may just direct you to see page 42. That payment is payment that relates to Mr. Feliti, am I right?
That is correct, Chair.
Does it relate to Mr. Feliti?
Yes, the first, if Chair has a look at page 41, Chair will see that that's the SARS income tax schedule.
Yeah.
And then the next page, although the name is not written, but it continues as the second page. But we can easily verify that by looking at the table that you prepared in your supplementary statement. Then we can just verify the amount. So if you could just quickly, just for the purpose of answering that question, if you could just quickly just turn to your supplementary statement, which is in the next file, next to you. If you could just turn to page 336 of that.
Did you say 366?
Yes, that is correct. Double 36, Chair. 336.
336.
336, Chair, yes. You will find that payment.
Yes.
In the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In the 8th column, Chair, at 336, the name of Mr. Feliti appears there, and the General Manager Human Resources appears, the date 22nd April, and the amount paid to him appears there.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you want to read that amount, Ms.?
Yes. Could you read that? How much was that?
Okay, the amount that was paid to Mr. Feliti is 4,697 rands. 4,697,059,000.96.
Thank you. And then maybe we take another case.
So that would have been somebody who earned more than R1 million a year, huh? Because we know that's supposed to represent over 2 years.
Yes, Chair.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes, okay.
Yes, thank you. And then maybe we could take another example, which we could just go to page 247, Chair, of bundle exhibit CC, 17.1.
What page?
At page 247.
In respect of people such as Mr. Feliti, it will be important in due course to have evidence that relates to whether somebody else was subsequently employed to do the same work that he would have been doing for the remainder of that period.
Yes, Chair.
And obviously also what they were paid compared to what Mr. Feliti was paid.
Yes.
So that becomes quite important.
Yes, Chair.
Because if somebody else was appointed to do that job, then it means that for the remainder of the period when Mr. Feliti is supposed to have been there, effectively the institution was paying two people for the same job.
Yes, yes.
A job that should be done by one person.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Chair. Then the next person who also parted ways with the SAPC, that appears at page 247. But what you have in relation to this person, whose name is Christian Olivier, is a mutual separation agreement. But for the purposes of your evidence, what you wish to highlight to the chairperson is the amount and the period for which he was paid. Am I correct?
Yes, yes, Chair.
Yes. And that would appear at page 249.
Well, don't you want to first tell us who we are talking about?
I did, Chair. I said Mr. Olivier.
Why do I always not hear you when you mention names?
Or maybe I'll speak to you first. It's Mr. Christian Olivier, Chair.
Is it Mr. C. Olivier?
Olivier, yes.
Okay.
Yes. There's a separation agreement that appears from pages 250.
Yes.
And that agreement was not signed by Mr. Olivier, as you can see, but it was signed by the SABC. If you look at maybe at page 254, the copy that you furnished to the commission is not signed by Mr. Olivier.
Okay, I'm sorry. I am at 248. Should I be moving to another
248, Chair.
page?
Chair, could you please move to page 250? We'll go back to 48. I just want to identify the agreement first.
Okay.
At 250, this is it's called a mutual separation agreement. Are you with me, Mr. Tiggs?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, please, you mustn't nod, please don't nod,
Okay.
just say yes, thank you. And if you look at page 254 of that, you will see that there is no signature appearing
Yes,
on behalf of Mr. Christian Olivier.
yes.
Okay. And did you extract this information from your human resources files?
That's correct.
Okay. Were you able to find any other one that he had signed?
No, not, yeah, no.
Only what you have furnished
Only
to,
what
to,
I've-
to
yes.
the commission. And then if you turn over the page, at page 255, you will see that there is a signature there on behalf of the SABC, and that's dated 25 October 2016.
That's correct.
Yes. But there is also another document which I would like you to just identify where Mr. Olivier has signed and said something.
Yes.
That, Chair, appears at page 247.
Yeah.
And the note is at 248.
Yes, Chair. And then at 247, Chair, maybe just to, so as to state the reason, because the Chair had, his questions were about the reasons. If you go to page 247, could you just read out what the reasons are that are advanced for separating from this employment agreement.
Okay, the letter is dated the 25th October 2016, addressed to Mr. C. Olivier, who was a General Manager Finance and Operations for the SABC, and the subject is SABC/Mr. C. Olivier separation. The above matter and the meetings held on 24th and 25th October 2016 have reference. During the above-mentioned meetings, management made it very clear that there was a breakdown in the relationship between the SABC and yourself, and that the SABC contemplated severing the relationship going forward. You were also informed that management would prepare a separation agreement and would provide you with a breakdown of the amount being offered. Attached are the following documents: 1, separation agreement, and 2, document reflecting on the breakdown of the separation amount offered. Please be informed that your last day in service of the SABC will be the 31st October 2016. You will also not be required to render any further services with immediate effect. Furthermore, it should be noted that the SABC will effect payment of the said separation amount into your banking account within 7 days from having received the relevant tax directive. The SABC herewith wants to thank you for your contributions made during your tenure with the SABC, and we wish you everything of the best for the future. And this was signed by Mohlolo Lipaka, who was the Group Executive Human Resources, acting at the time. And then it goes on: I, Christian Olivier, hereby acknowledge receipt of the letter and have noted the contents thereof. And he signed it. There's also notes there that say, I do not agree with this and reserve my rights. And the letter is dated the 25th, or he signed on the 25th October 2016.
Ms. Norman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
It won't be every letter that he would need to read in full. He could just give the gist, such as this one, to say, according to the SAPC, the reason was a breakdown of trust of the relationship.
Yes, Chair.
And this is the amount they gave, or something like that, depending on what really is important.
No, thank you, Chair. We'll do that. Thank you. And then at page 249, you drew our attention to the period for which Mr. Olivier was paid. And there's various columns. Could you just talk to those columns that are there and the period for which he was paid?
Okay, column 1 shows the current annual TGRP, and TGRP stands for Total Guaranteed Remuneration Package. The grand total there is 2,172,127 and 34 cents. So that was the annual amount. The current monthly TGRP is 181,010,000.61. And then the next column shows 24 months.
I'm sorry. You said TGRP stands for Total
Guaranteed Remuneration Package.
Oh, okay. And does that amount to your annual salary?
That amounts to...
Normally
it does, Chair. It's the total cost of employment. Sometimes they call it total cost of employment.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair. The next column shows 24 months. And the total amount there is 4,344,254.68. The next column is 36 months, shows 36 months. In other words, the remuneration for 36 months would have been 6,516,382.02. And for 48 months, the total amount is 6,516,382,02 cents. Sorry, let me take that again. 6,516,382.02. The second last column shows 60 months, which is 10,860,636.70. And the last column shows the remainder of contract, which is 62 months. The total there is 11,475,852.39.
So
Thank
would
you,
would that mean that remaining period, that's a period of about 5 years, am I right?
The remaining period is a period of 5 years. Maybe let me explain
Yes.
where this comes from.
Yes.
The employee at the time of this settlement was 54 years and 10 months old. So they were left with 2 months before they could reach 55 years. And at the SABC, you qualify for early retirement from 55 years. And so this total amount is based on 62 months, which is a contract period of 5 years. So you are effectively paid for 5 years plus 2 months, which is 62 months.
How long was his contract? He was on a fixed-term contract,
He was a permanent employee at the time of the settlement.
not a fixed-term contract.
Not a fixed-term contract, Chair.
Okay. And you say he was, 2 months away from qualifying for retirement? Early retirement?
He was 2 months away from qualifying for early retirement. So
Yes.
he would have been 54 years of age plus 10 months.
Yes.
So he was left with 2 months before reaching age 55.
Yes.
And so then, in terms of retirement, ultimate retirement, he would have reached retirement age at age 60 because the retirement...
The compulsory retirement age is 60.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes.
So executives for the SABC must retire at age 60.
Yes.
The rest of the employees retire at age 63.
Yes.
So instead of the organization waiting for Mr. Phiri to serve out the five-year term leading up to his ultimate retirement at age 60, the organization decided to let him go at age 54 and 10 months, and then paid him the balance of the contract, which was 62 months. Sorry, the balance of the contract, which should have been 62 months.
Well, I think that is what confused me earlier on. It's not the balance of the contract, because he was not a fixed-term contract employee.
Correct,
He
Chair.
he was on an indefinite employment contract.
That is correct, Chair.
But once he reached age 60, he would have been obliged to retire.
That is correct, Chair.
Yeah. So basically what they decided is, we will pay whatever you would have earned between now and age 60.
That's correct.
So that you can go.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes, okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm advised that it's time for the short adjournment.
Yes, maybe before we do that, is the position that you don't know the circumstances surrounding the breakdown of the relationship?
It is the position, Chair.
It is the position, because, Ms. Norman, this will be
Yes.
important. It could be a waste of taxpayers' money,
Yes.
but that might have nothing to do with our terms of reference. But it could be that it is linked. So it will be important to see whether we are able to tie it to
Yes, Chair.
to our terms of reference.
Yes.
And there is an interesting feature, because I think ordinarily, if there is a breakdown of an employment relationship, you are not obliged, I think, to pay for the whole period that the employee would have paid. You are simply obliged to pay, to give them notice. Maybe you might or you might not be obliged, depending on a number of things, to pay what may be called severance pay. but it might be that you are not even supposed to pay severance pay because it's not a retrenchment, so therefore one may look at it from the point of view of what is it that the SAB was obliged to pay and what did it pay and how much is that difference and what reasons are really given. What was the motive for paying so much money when there was just a breakdown in the relationship?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Okay, all right. We'll take the tea adjournment and
Thank
we
you.
will resume at 25 to 12. We
Thank you,
adjourn.
Chair.
All rise.
We may proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. The other example that you would like to bring to the attention of the Chair, Mr. Thekiso, is that the one that relates to Mr. Masinga, am I correct? That's the next one we'd like to deal with. And that
Yes.
you will find, Mr. Chairman, you'll find that at page 122.
One 122.
122, Mr. Chairman, yes.
At least I did hear you mention the name this time.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. S.M. Masinga.
That is correct, Chair.
Yes, okay.
Yes. The reason given for the termination roughly is that Mr. Masinga had engaged in other business interests and therefore a conflict. Sorry, are you lost? Have you found?
No, I'm fine.
Oh, you seem to be looking for something, sorry. Are you at page 122, Mr. Thekiso?
I am.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
What I'm saying is, to summarize the reason, could you just summarize the reason without reading it into the record? The reason for the termination of the fixed-term executive service agreement.
Thank you, Chair. The reasons for termination of the contract of employment by SABC on Mr. Masinga was that he was allegedly guilty of a number of misconducts. But before the matter could be ventilated in a proper disciplinary inquiry, the organization decided to terminate the fixed-term contract and entered into a settlement agreement with him.
Yes. And if you look at page 133, I beg your pardon. No, I'm so sorry. I turned to the wrong page. I wanted to look at page 130. This is where the agreement is signed by both parties.
What was his position, please? Mr. Masinga.
Mr. Masinga, he was, I'll give you now, Chair. It will be in the list. I'll give you now. I beg your pardon, Chair. He was the group executive, technology.
Oh, okay. Did you say we must go to page 133?
Yes, Chair. I wanted to just, for the witness to identify, not to identify the signatures, but to see that this was signed on the 21st of April, 2016. Are you there, Mr. Thekiso?
But are you on another bundle? Because on this one, 133 is the second page of a letter addressed to Mr. Matlala, not Mr. Masinga.
Yeah.
No, Chair. Page 130.
130?
130, yes, Chair.
Okay. I thought 2 times you said you agreed when I said 133.
I beg your pardon, Chair. No, I'm sure I didn't pay attention to the page.
Okay, 130.
Yes, page 130.
Yes, okay.
Yes. So that is 21 April 2016. Are you there?
I'm there, Chair.
Yes, thank you. And then, according to the schedule that we have prepared, which would appear at page, in the next bundle, CC Exhibit 27.2, it shows that this relationship terminated on 21 April 2016, and that an amount of money was paid to him, just over 4 million rand paid to him.
What page is the amount reflected?
The amount is reflected, Chair. If Chair goes to the bundle X, CC 17.2, at page 337. And if Chair could count just
Oh, I can see Masinga.
8 lines,
SM.
that's correct, yes.
Yeah, he was paid for
About 4.5.
53974.5,99, 4.5, effectively 4.5 million.
4.5 million, yes, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. The one amount that you did not mention, which was that huge amount, is that one of...
Was he on a fixed-term contract?
Yes, he was.
And how much time was left? Do we know?
Can I check?
You see, all of those things
Yes,
are relevant if the idea
Context.
is to say there was something illegitimate about
Yes.
this.
yes. Are you looking for information?
Yes.
All right, okay. You just indicate what you're looking for.
So I'm trying to find an indication as to the contract term.
Yes, it will be,
Yeah.
although,
Well, how much time was left in his fixed-term contract if his contract of employment was a fixed term, or I think the heading at page 122
it
indicates...
appears, may I take Chair to page 128? 128 shows that his term of, it says Masinga's fixed-term contract with the SABC, which became effective from 15 May 2015 and was to continue until 21 May 2018, is hereby terminated with immediate effect.
Okay, I can see that's 3.6.
That's 3.6,
That's
Chair.
correct.
Yes.
And this was, the termination was, the letter of termination is dated 24 June 2015.
The letter of
Yeah,
termination.
at page 122.
Yes, that is correct, at 122. Yes, Chair. Yes.
So he worked 1 month?
No, Chair, it's years. It's from, this is...
Yeah, it says 3.6 at 128.
Yes,
Says Masinga's fixed-term contract with the SABC, which became effective from 15 May 2015
yes, sir.
and was to continue until 31 May 2018,
Yes,
is hereby terminated
Yes.
with effect from the effective date of this agreement.
yes.
That means he worked,
Worked for 1 month,
for 1 month, 1 week, or something like that.
that's correct, yes.
And then his contract was terminated.
And then he was paid for the full term, it appears, looking at the amount.
But yeah, that may be so, but do we have something that does say whether he was paid that amount represented the balance of his contract?
We do have the schedule, Chair, which has been prepared in relation to the documents that Human Resources have.
Correct.
That amount, Chair, which we read earlier, the 4.5.
Yes, yes.
That is correct.
That's correct.
But then, Chair, if you look at the settlement agreement itself, it gives a different amount. It may very well be that there's a reason, but it almost doubles that amount.
Yeah.
If I may direct you, Chair, to page 127.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Thekiso, could you read paragraph 2.2.7 of the settlement amount? How much, what did they say was going to be the payment there?
Okay, thanks, Chair. 2.2.7, settlement amount means the net total sum of 2,678,409.080, which is 2,678,419 rand and 80 cents, free of any deductions, statutory or otherwise, payable by the SABC to Masinga in full, and final settlement of all the legal proceedings and attendant disputes.
That suggests that that amount of 2.6 million may not necessarily be just the remuneration he would have been paid for the balance of the term.
Yes.
It may be that it's meant to settle whatever disputes there were between the parties.
Between them, yes.
Because of what it says there. But that's different from the 4.5 million or so that appears in the other bundle. And I don't know whether, even if you deduct tax, it would
No.
come to that amount. It
In
seems,
fact, it's
yeah.
almost double. It's almost
Yeah.
double that amount, yes, Chair. But Chair, the witness is going to come back with the matters that the Chair had raised. The witness is going to come back and do a proper table of the matters that you've raised about the
Yes.
incumbents and all that. Then that way, we don't have to waste time going through
Yeah.
each and every
Yeah.
contract.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it will facilitate that situation.
Yes, but, well, with all the terminations that we are talking about, it will be important, as I said earlier, to show that there is an illegitimate reason. The one that we started with, on the face of it,
Yes,
it does appear illegitimate, but we might need to get, it might be necessary to get more information as to why was the contract terminated in circumstances where the person was still available to continue, and was there no need for the duties that he would have performed to be performed by anybody, or did somebody was somebody brought in?
Yes.
And what is more important about that one is that there is not even an allegation of any problems in the relationship
yes,
between that one and the employer. The other two that we have dealt with, the one, there's an allegation of a breakdown in the relationship. And if indeed that was factually correct, that might give problems to showing that the money was paid illegitimately. But the fact that the person had only worked for 1 month and a few days makes that termination quite questionable. You know, whether somebody working a month is enough for you to conclude that there is a breakdown in a relationship. So one needs to see whether there is another reason. There's a different reason.
yes.
The other one, I think was, or this one, I think the last two related to trust issues,
Yes.
breakdown of the relationship,
Yes.
both of them, I think. So they might be more difficult than the first one to establish an illegitimate reason, but it always depends whether there are facts which support what is being alleged. But again, whatever we are doing, we've got to leave room for a situation where a termination is wrong and maybe has no basis, has no proper basis, but somebody wrongly thought there was a proper basis. And it's not necessarily an illegitimate reason.
True. Yes, true, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And then with the exercise of that you've done in respect of each and every one of these terminations, which you've extracted as those that you believe they talk to this whole project of state capture. But as Chair has said, then the analysis, you are going to have to
Yes.
do another table and you'll have to come back with that analysis. But just for conclusion, these amounts of all these payouts during that period of largely between 2016, most of them, 2014, 2016, the grand total of what was paid, you reflected in Exhibit 17.2 at page 338.
Correct, Chair.
And that amount comes to how much?
The amount is 102,403,331.97.
Is that the amount, total amount paid to various employees whose contracts were terminated in certain circumstances
Yes.
during a certain period?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay. Including the ones we have talked about?
Yes.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
And in each instance, you've got the name of the employee, you've got the title of the employee, and then you have the amounts paid to them. But maybe just what is important you've also titled them, you've got the group, there's largely most group executives.
Yes.
You've got group executive technology, you've got group executive, chief executive officer, you've got group executive news, you've got group employee relations consultant.
Correct.
So most of, you've got all those people who are holding those senior group executive radio.
Correct.
Yes. So then when you come back, then we are going to continue with these so as not to waste time. Do the exercise that the chair has asked you to do in respect of each and every one and the replacement of the people that you say in most instances were irregularly appointed in the place of these people, in some of these people.
Correct.
Thank you, Chair. With your leave then, Chair, may this witness be released for now, for him to come back and conclude.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
You are excused for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, I wish to call now Ms. Lulama Mokhobo.
Yes, that's
Thank you.
fine.
Her statement, Mr. Chairman, is one of the files that the registrar had placed before you, marked CC20 and Exhibit CC24. And her statement is marked CC.
The two that we have used in regard to this witness,
We're not
are we
gonna
still
need-
going to need them today?
We will need just the one, Chair.
Yes.
For,
17
sorry, Chair,
point,
may I just, we will need only, Chair, Exhibit CC 17.1.
okay.
Yes, the other one we are not going to need now.
Is her statement, what page is her statement?
The statement, Chair, appears
Under 21.
yes, it appears under the
Divider
file divider
21.
21.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
okay.
May the witness, Chair, be sworn in?
Yes, please administer the oath or affirmation.
Please state your full names for the record.
Lulama Mokhobo?
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
Yes.
Do you swear that the evidence you'll give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Mokhobo, could you please just state for the record your qualifications, please?
I have a master's degree in instructional technology from Utah State University. Prior to that, I had a BA and concurrent diploma in education from the then University of Botswana in Swaziland, now known as University of Swaziland. And I matriculated in Orlando High in 1974. My apologies, it's so long ago.
Well, you didn't have to say it.
Yes, thank you. And before you, then on the 16th of February 2012, you joined the SABC, is that correct?
Yes.
In what capacity were you employed?
I joined as the Group CEO of the SABC.
Yes. When you joined the SABC, before you joined it, where did you work?
Prior to that, I had worked as the Group Executive for Public Broadcasting Services, and that was from 2005 to 2010.
Still at the SABC?
Still at the SABC.
Yes. Could you then tell the chair what your responsibilities were as a group executive officer of the SABC?
My responsibilities were to lead the executive team and therefore the entire organization in delivering on the strategic imperatives of the SABC, in the implementation of all policies that had been approved by the board, and in some instances coming up with new policies and developing new strategies in order to meet the requirements for the SABC for DTT and other activities. And I was also a member of the board, an executive member of the board. And by virtue of sitting as an executive member of the board, one could also say I was involved in the development of policies, strategic direction, and to some degree, oversight of the organization.
Yes. Ms. Mokhobo, you deal with this in paragraph 7 of your statement. I beg your pardon, you have not identified your statement. I beg your pardon. Sorry. Could you please look at the file that is in front of you? That is under folder number 21, the divider number 21. Is that your statement?
Yes, it is.
If you turn to the last page, where that would be page 9. Is that your signature?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Did you make the statement freely and voluntarily?
Yes, I did.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Just to move then to what you have stated, the reasons for the Commission's investigators to approach you, you articulate those reasons at paragraph 7 of your statement.
Yes.
Because they had a specific request that, could you just tell the chair why, what you were asked to deal with? Yes.
When I arrived at the SABC, the TNA breakfast.
Sorry, could you just, what you say in paragraph 7, just tell the chair what is it that you were called to deal with by the investigators? Yes.
Okay. I was requested to deal with the matters around TNA Media, which was the television broadcast arm of TNA, and the New Age newspaper, which was one of the products of TNA.
It is correct that you were involved in the signing of the contract between the SABC and the TNA
Yes,
Media?
I was.
Sorry, what was your answer?
Yes, I was.
Yes, you were. Or before you deal with the contracts, could you just tell the chairperson how did it come about that SABC wanted to do business with TNA Media?
I'm not very clear of the circumstances under which TNA started broadcasting jointly. Well, it started working with the SABC because that happened long before I started at the SABC. However, a matter of concern when I arrived there was that they were operating without a contract. And the dangers of doing that are quite obvious, that there could suddenly be requirements of the SABC that it could not meet. And for the protection of the integrity of the organization and the protection of the product that the organization was broadcasting, it was important for a contract to be entered into.
Yes. So when you say they were already doing business with the SABC, that means that they were already delivering newspapers with the SABC?
They were already delivering newspapers, and the live broadcasts were already happening.
And this was happening without any formal contract?
Yes.
Yes. And then you deal...
I'm sorry. Do you remember for how long before you came they had been doing this? Or is that something you can't remember?
Chair, unfortunately, I do not have the detail.
Yes.
However, I am aware that they had been running for quite a while.
For quite some time.
This could be tested with the SABC itself.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Then you discovered that, look, there was no contract, and what are the steps that you took in order to regularize that situation?
At that point, it turned out that the then acting head of news, Mr. Mike Siluma, and his executive management team were also aware of this problem, I'll call it a problem. And they had written a request to the legal department to draft that contract. So essentially, this process was driven by the news department itself.
And then thereafter, then you had this contract which you deal with in paragraph 11 of your statement.
Yes.
Chair, that contract would be found at page, starting from page 10.
Yes, I've got it.
Thank you, Chair. May I direct your attention, Chair, to page 30? I'm sorry, there's two. No? Two agreements.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, the
Yes,
signature page.
yeah, that's the signature page. Ms. Mokhobo, is that your signature at page 30?
Yes.
And your names are reflected there?
Yes.
Yes. I would like you...
I'm sorry, which, her signature is the one on behalf of SABC. Is that the one?
Yes.
Oh, there is your name. Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
Chair. Yes, and this was signed on the 13th of March, 2012.
Yes. it
Yes,
was.
thank you. Could you just give the Chair briefly, what did you understand as the material terms of the agreement? What is it that was expected of the SABC and what was expected of the TNA in terms of the agreement?
In terms of the agreement, the TNA was to provide, and it did, to provide the venues, invite the guests, and provide all the requirements that the SABC would need in order to be able to broadcast the show. And all of these, the TNA would do out of its own volition without any assistance from the SABC or any legal obligation to the SABC in terms of accessing the different people who appeared on the show. And also the SABC had no responsibility whatsoever with the accessing, the creation, of the events themselves. The SABC's role, on the other hand, was to broadcast the events. And the reason for the SABC it was important to do that was the events were mainly aimed at government, and with the SABC's core value being that of public broadcasting, and therefore adequately informing and educating the public about what was going on in the country, in particular in relation to the principles of the country and how they ran the country. The SABC and myself in particular obviously saw this as an opportunity to do what was right for the public. And therefore, initially, they presented themselves as something that was for public good, and therefore it made sense for the SABC to do it. But secondly, there was going to be no exchange of money. The SABC was not going to pay the TNA anything whatsoever for the events and for the expenses that the TNA incurred, if it did incur any expenses regarding the setup. And also, the TNA would be under no obligation to pay the SABC any money for the presence of the SABC. Now, that may sound a little bit strange, Chair. However, the reason is quite simple and straightforward. In terms of the broadcasting charter, and in particular, the policies on news, the SABC could not and was completely debarred from accepting any sponsorship for the news itself. And the reason was quite simply that if it was receiving any monies, then it would be difficult for it to remain objective. So if Party X provided the cash and the SABC received the cash, and the SABC needed to cover a story on Party X, then Party X could very easily say, but I'm paying you. So why? So it was to block all possibilities of corrupt activities happening within the SABC News.
I would like us to go back. When you arrived, there was an arrangement that was already in existence for these breakfast shows. There was no formal contract or agreement between the SABC and TNA or anybody about these. A report must have been given to you, even if it's verbal, to say, this is how this thing came about. I would like to hear that. What were you told was the main motivation that was given to SABC when they were approached to be involved in this thing, and what was in it for those who approached the SABC, what was in it for the SABC, and it may be that what was in it for the SABC was what you have said, namely the news. But I would like you to take me from there.
Chair, what I was told was that the approach that the news department had decided to adopt in partnership, in parentheses, in partnership with TNA, was to expose to the public what government was doing for the public, for the country. And to that extent, the events seemed to be completely apolitical, in the sense that just about all major political parties would go on and say what they needed to say to the public through this channel. And I'm thinking of the major parties here. The DA, for instance, would be present on certain occasions, and so would a number of political parties would be involved. So, as I initially said, Chair, when I was informed of the critical value that that programming was providing, and the board itself, members of the board, were participating very actively in the breakfasts, in that they would be invited, and at the opening of each breakfast, whoever was representing the SABC would go to the podium and say a word or two about the event and why it was being held. So there was very intense participation from the SABC right at the top level of oversight at the SABC and the political head of the SABC and other politicians. So the reasons were sufficiently compelling for me to not say, no, this is wrong, you can't do it. They were compelling enough to accept that, indeed, the programming played a critical role.
Was your understanding that the idea of this breakfast show had originated from the news department or had originated from TNA or from outside SABC?
My understanding was that there was a mutual origination. It's a very strange way to put it.
That would be very strange.
But what I would suspect is,
yes,
with TNA having been the service provider, so to speak, I'm quite sure that they may have engaged the SABC in saying, can you come on board and let's do this together.
Yes, well, maybe somebody else will enlighten, because it's likely that the idea came from one side and they approached the other side to say, this is what we are thinking, and then the other side was persuaded, and then they dealt with it. So as you understood it, the purpose was to do what with this breakfast show?
The purpose was, as they kind of sloganized it, it was to bring government to the people. That's how it was sloganized. And to the extent that the number of broadcasts increased and the trips to areas outside of Gauteng increased, the argument was those trips and the setups in the remote areas were important because those people also needed to know what government was doing. For instance, there is a time towards the elections when I know that from the political party's perspective, it was important for them as part of their rallying of the people. It was important for them to go out and talk to the people. And to that extent, there were quite a number of regional broadcasts that were done, which would be in, for instance, I know there was one in Mabatu in particular, where the local politicians were present and they did the discussion and the question and answer sessions. So that's really it.
So the idea was to, so to speak, bring government to the people, and government would then tell the people what they are doing, what government is doing, I assume.
Yes.
And I guess that to the extent that it would be possible for government to also hear what people have to say about services, service delivery in the various areas. That's one. So is that correct?
That is correct. And in fact, Sir Chair, there were question and answer sessions.
Yes.
Where there would be a personnel from the
A
news
moderator
department, a news anchor, who would be present in the breakfast
Yes.
and facilitate a discussion between whoever the main speakers were and the audience that was present. And they would also run SMS services. So
Yes.
the broader public out there that couldn't be in the room could
Yes.
also ask their questions, and the questions would be run
Yes.
through.
Okay, and maybe you were still going to deal with this. You have said the SABC was not going to be paid for anything, and it wasn't going to pay for anything, as you understood it. But TNA would make money out of it or not, as you understood it?
You know, Chair, what I understood was that TNA would find a way to organize the events. As far as I was aware, the relationship between TNA and the SABC on those aspects was completely
There was a distance.
arm's length. It was very
Yeah.
distant. The SABC had no right to find out how and when they were getting the money and how much it was. And therefore, in respecting that relationship in that manner, I was never aware of the monies that TNA was receiving in the running of the broadcasts.
So the answer would the answer be that you didn't know whether they were going to make money or not make money? You regarded it as SABC, you regarded that as really none of your business. Is that right?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In paragraph 11, where you've attached the agreement, you also indicate who was negotiating on behalf of the SABC this contract.
Yes.
Yes, and who was that person?
Mr. Tabang Matibe,
And in which department was he?
he was the acting head of the legal department.
Yes. And if I were to take you back again, Ms. Mokhobo, to page 30, where your signature appears, and maybe 10 over to page 31. I see there's the full name of Mr. Matibe. Did he sign on that page?
Yes, that is his signature.
Yes, thank you. And you also signed on that page, and again, at page 30, you signed and Mr. Nazim Hoa signed.
Yes.
Yes. Did you, before you entered into this agreement, did you as a person, personally, at a personal level, know Mr. Nazim Hoa?
No, not really. Sounds like a bit of a strange question. We only got introduced when this matter was being attended to.
Yes. And at this stage, had you met any of the Gupta family members? Have you ever met them at any point?
I had met, I think it was Atul Gupta,
Yes.
many years ago, and that was long before I joined the SABC the first time. Early 2000s, possibly 2003, I can't remember. But this was when the first meeting of BRICS
Yes.
was coordinated in India, and I got invited. At the time, President Thabo Mbeki was at the helm of this country, and I was invited as a member of his delegation to attend the
Yes.
inaugural, it was called, the inaugural meeting. And that's how I met him. And I must say that at that time, there was no real, I would say, acknowledgement of each other. It was just people from South Africa saying hello to each other, and that was it.
Yes, thank you. And then after your appointment, did you have occasion to meet him?
After I was appointed, and it was something quite strange. I was Hlaudi Motswening, who was acting COO, came to my office and said, I have to take you somewhere very quickly. And he wouldn't tell me where it was. It was all very hush-hush. And we arrived at this massive house, and I saw on the wall Sahara Computers. And he said, well, we are here because these people want to congratulate you. So I went in together with Hlaudi. I do recall that my phone and everybody else's phone was taken and the battery was removed. And we were led into a dining room where the people who were present proceeded to congratulate me.
And who were those people who congratulated you?
I seem to recall that there was, I think it was AJ Gupta, if I'm not mistaken, Atul Gupta, I think he was there as well, Duduzane Zuma, and Mr. Isma Hashule's son, can't remember his name. And then there was Hlaudi and myself. If there were other people, I really can't quite recall them, because this was a while ago. And we sat at the table, there was a bit of food, and they congratulated me and promptly told me that they would have liked to play a role in SABC's DTT future, because they were interested in creating a news channel, and that they would hope that I would allow them or enable them to get access to a channel. And at that point, I said to them, look, I do not believe that it would be easy to just give anybody a channel. I'm quite sure that there would have to be a proper tender process, and a number of, it would be opened up, and we expect that a number of people would apply also to be part of the DTT network of the SABC when it did come about. And really there was nothing further to discuss, and they said congratulations, and that was the end of it. I wasn't there long. We then promptly went back to the office.
Yes. Now, then, what was your, when they were saying, what was your understanding of that conversation that you had with them, that you would make it possible? What was your understanding? What is it that they wanted from you?
I saw it as a lobbying of sorts for them to be afforded an opportunity on SABC platforms at that time. And like I said, I didn't go in prepared because I didn't know what this was about. And as I said, it was just to congratulate me.
Did you find that conversation in any way improper, or were you found that, look, I mean, I'm not going to do what they want, I can't do it until, as you say, the tender processes have been followed. But how did you assess that conversation?
I found it a little bit strange that such a proposition could be put to me. But then I excused them mentally inside of me as well. You know, this is another lobbying, because there's always a lot of lobbying going around with people seeking business opportunities.
Then just on the reading of your statement, having been appointed on the 16th of February 2012, and this contract was signed...
Before you move
sorry.
to another point, Ms. Lulama,
Sorry.
this sounds very strange to me. Here is the group CEO of SABC. Somebody is saying to her, please come, I want to take you somewhere, and doesn't want to tell her where. How come you didn't insist to Mr. Musoneng, I can't just go anywhere just because you think I should go there? I'm not going where I don't know.
He was very persuasive, Chair. And besides, with me being new and him being the acting COO at some point, acting CEO, and he was persuasive because I kept insisting, where are we going? He said, no, you will see. You will see. Come, let's just go. And there was a car parked, ready to take us there. It wasn't his car. I assumed it was a car belonging to the Guptas. And
It wasn't his car that he normally used.
no, it wasn't Mr. Mutwaning's car. It was, I assumed, a Gupta car with a chauffeur.
Yes.
And I then thought, you know what, maybe there is no real harm.
Yes.
I had no reason at that point
Yes.
to be suspicious of him.
And I guess, well, you might also, being new, you might have also wanted to build relationships with people that you were working with, including the COO, and you might not necessarily needed to show distrust or anything without a reason.
Yes, Chair.
That kind of thing.
Particularly, Chair, because Hlaudi was such a trusted member of the SABC executive.
Yes.
And as acting COO, he also sat on the board, and he
Yes.
was very well loved, and there were accolades and accolades heaped on him all the time.
Yes.
So I really had no real reason
Yes.
to be suspicious.
Yes.
And yes.
Yes.
But having gone there to was it at the residence or was it at the company of Sahara Computers?
It was at the residence.
At-
Then
at
it
the
had
residence.
a plaque outside.
Yes, at the residence.
Yes.
Okay. Having been taken there and now finding out that all this was just so that somebody must have a chance to say congratulations, didn't you find that quite strange? You know, why must people that, one, I think you didn't know really much, and why, if they want to congratulate you, why must you be taken to them? And didn't you find that strange?
It was a bit strange, Chair. It was a bit strange because there was really no further substance.
Were you
to
upset
that.
about it that Mr. Mzoneng took you there for that, really?
I was intrigued and maybe slightly annoyed because, you know, I was taken away from my desk.
Yeah.
And yes, it was around lunchtime, so, you know. But I was intrigued.
Yeah, yeah. But you did you say anything to him afterwards about it, or you just allowed it to just die down?
I can't quite recall what
You
I
can't
said.
remember,
to him.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And then how soon after your appointment did this meeting, congratulatory meeting, take place?
Gosh, I think it was within a week, within the
Of your
first week.
appointment?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And between the time of you had the congratulatory meeting and the signing of the agreement, did you at any stage have any interaction with any of these people or some of the people that had congratulated you at all?
No, I have to think very carefully now because I think what happened was in the conversations, and these were not formal conversations and not minuted, the concern was raised that, you know, we are busy doing these breakfasts and there's no contract. And this was some of the members, board members, talking about it. And I agreed with them that indeed, you know, you couldn't have a relationship of this nature, which involved the SABC, OB events, and personnel going out of the SABC. Yes, they did that regularly in the regular collection of news. However, for other things, however, having almost like an exclusive relationship with a particular party, that it was not proper. And in fact, Chair, there was eventually going to be an audit finding, because once a relationship is regular, then surely it has to be regulated, particularly if there are very specific deliverables from either party. If you look at it in terms of the SABC's own process of acquiring content, you have to enter into an agreement. However, for the news, yes, it is different because they have to go and cover what is going on at the time that it's going on, so a contract may not be necessary. But in this one, because this was a very steady supplier, content supplier, it was important that there be a contract to regulate the relationship.
So then, how frequent were these breakfast shows?
Chair, initially they were supposed to be just 2 times a month. Now, this was 2012. And then 2012 was just 2 years before the 2014 elections. There was going to be a State of the Nation address in Cape Town, opening of Parliament, and various other events, important events, were happening within the country. There was the launch of the DTT, there were all kinds of events that were happening. And for the news department, it was important content for them, and that is why they actually initiated the contracting process. It was important for them to have access to whatever content they could find which spoke directly to the people. And that is how we ended up in a place where the contract had to be entered into. Now, my signature on the contract was really from a protocol perspective, if I can call it that, because the TNA had their chief executive representing them. And I was the chief executive of the SABC, working with the SABC News team in this regard. Therefore, that's how my signature came on. I do believe, however, that it could easily have been handled by the acting chief operating officer together with the group executive of news.
Yes. Because you've already said that this was more important for the news department, who was at the time heading the news department?
It was Mr. Jimmy Matthews, who was acting head of news.
Yes.
First, there was Mr. Mike Siluma,
Yes.
who was there for a very short time. And then he was removed and replaced by Jimmy Matthews.
Yes. I had asked about the frequency, and then you started by saying, well, they were supposed to be twice a month. And then when did those, did they increase over time? And if they did, to what extent?
They did increase over time. It's very difficult to calculate the extent without looking at the records coming out of the SABC News department itself, and I think it may be worthwhile to get those records. I do not have them. As you can imagine, having left the organization, I have no access to a lot of documentation.
All right. Can I just take you...
But, sorry, from your own recollection, what's your sense of how much they increased? Would it have been three times a month, 4 times a month, or you can't even remember that, more or less?
I do not believe, Chair, that there was an exact formula.
Yes.
They were all driven by
Events.
Okay. And not necessarily by a formula.
Yes, okay.
Yes. Maybe we need to deal with the aspect that you mentioned, that you would have your reporters going to the places where the breakfast shows were going to happen. This is a matter that was raised by 2 witnesses yesterday, by the head of news, Ms. Patisoma Kopeni, and by the chief financial officer, Ms. Yolande van Billion, that the SABC never invoiced TNA for the costs that they incurred for airtime, for having their reporters traveling there, for their equipment, for all of those expenses. They were never invoiced for that. Do you have an explanation as to why that was so?
From the very outset, it had been agreed that the content coming out of those breakfasts was very newsworthy. And SABC News would not accept money to cover a story of whatever nature. And therefore, if we call the event a base for a story, they could not charge for it. And therefore, it would not be proper for TNA to pay the SABC. Chair, you may recall that I mentioned earlier that in terms of the SABC news policies and the broadcasting charter, the SABC was allowed to go out and gather news anywhere and to whatever extent that it wanted to. However, the SABC news department could not accept cash money for doing so, because that would effectively cause their independence to be
compromised.
To be compromised, yes.
So would that even apply to the expenses that the SABC would have incurred in gathering or in attending the breakfast shows?
Let's put it this way, Chair. The SABC worked on budgets. So there would be a budget request from news, and through a rigorous process that would end up with board approval for the allocation of the budget, SABC News would receive its own budget. From there, SABC News was free to do whatever it deemed fit and proper and pay for it with their budget. Therefore, the group executive head of news, together with his management team, had it completely within their power to expend the monies that they expended and to temper the expending of the monies if they felt that it was too high. And it's important to state also that any interference on my part, or maybe let me say intervention on my part in this regard, would be viewed as interference, as in me preventing news from doing its job. A very, very fine line here, in the sense that as the editor-in-chief of the SABC, I could not go down to them and say, you can't do this, you can do this. And they would have to come to me to say, we have a problem here, can you help us resolve it? That's the only way that I would get involved with the news department. And none of that came to me.
And then in the following paragraphs, then you deal with the terms of the contract itself, but I'd like to take you to some specific terms of the contract, maybe starting with the one relating to the frequency of these. Page 15. If I may just direct you to go to page 15, please.
Page 15.
Yes.
What's the page number?
Page 15, Chair. 15. According to paragraph 4 of that agreement was going to remain in force for how long?
For a period of 36 months.
Yes. And then there are just some terms that I would like you to just highlight there. For instance, relating to the one that you've just dealt with, paragraph 5.6. Could you just read that term?
It is specifically recorded that the SABC shall broadcast 2 events per month, and the SABC shall at all times have final editorial control.
Yes. So did you then, when you said that over time these breakfast shows increased, the number of shows increased, did you then sign another agreement or an addendum to this agreement?
There was no addendum signed. And once again, it had to do with the news department believing that they needed the content and therefore being available to cover the content.
Yes. And may I also take you to the paragraph that deals with costs, which is 17.1.21, if my recollection is correct. If I may just take you to that, Chair. 1.12, no. I beg your pardon, it's I had noted it, sorry. May I just take time, Chair, to just get to that paragraph, sorry. I've marked it, where it says that the SABC shall not be liable to pay subcontractors. I'll take you to that. It's 7.1.21, not 17. It appears at page 18. It's 7.1.21. Could you read that term, please? 7.121, if you go to page 18.
Oh, okay. It's a continuation from 7.1.20.
Yes.
And it begins with "and" at the top there. And
Yes.
timeously pay all amounts due to any subcontractor in respect of any services rendered by that subcontractor in terms of this agreement, if relevant. SABC shall not be held liable for payment of any amounts due to such subcontractors under any circumstances whatsoever, and any such contractor shall have no claim for same against the SABC.
Yes. And was there, other than the terms that you find, for example, in paragraph 7, which were the duties and obligations of the TNA media, maybe you could just highlight, because the one about the venues, that's the more prominent term that most people refer to, and that appears at page 16. That TNA media shall convene the events twice on a monthly basis or as mutually agreed by the parties in writing. If you look at 7.1.1.
Yes.
Yes. So until the time you left the SABC, you were not privy to any other written terms, changing the original terms of this agreement?
No, no.
Yes.
And Chair, I believe that perhaps this was a caveat for the news department to have the flexibility to increase the broadcast to more than the 2 times per month.
Yes.
And I would assume that the in writing possibly happened between them through email or phone calls. I'm not certain there.
Yes. And then if you could just highlight those terms that you believe are important for our purposes, because there's one, you had told Chair that once there is a regular relationship between a particular supplier, or I would maybe call it a supplier, and the SABC, so there might be something wrong with that relationship. But I'm just, for instance, in 7.1.10, on the same page, it says, ensure exclusivity to SABC as the official broadcast partner of the events. So it seems to me that at this point, then the relationship was regarded as that of a partnership.
I think this word was used quite loosely, in the sense that earlier on, we do mention that the relationship should not be construed as a partnership of any sorts. This was just loosely put as 2 parties working together. Therefore, a party which is TNA, a party which is SABC, would then, I suppose, in this instance, they were trying to emphasize the working together.
Or the paragraph that you want to refer to, where you say there was, that this relationship was not to be construed as a partnership, is that paragraph
Yes.
6.4 on the
Yes.
same page?
Yes.
Okay. And then, who was going to monitor then the implementation of this agreement?
It was mainly the Chief Operating Officer, in this instance acting with Saudi Mutswening at the helm, together with the Group Executive of News, who would be Jimmy Matthews.
Yes. And you would have no role to play in making sure that they stuck to the terms of the contract?
No, I wouldn't have a role to play. Once again, with the independence of the news department being enshrined completely.
Thank you. And if we go on then onto your statement, you highlight in your statement largely the terms as you copied them from the contract itself, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. And all those, they go up to paragraph 18. And you, what is of interest largely is the obligations of the SABC. You deal with those in paragraph 19, that's at page 5 of your statement.
I did them on page 5.
Yes, yes, page 5.
Yes, sir.
And then at 19.1, the SABC had identified a particular channel where these were going to be held.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, and that was in?
On SABC 2,
yes.
on the morning live slot.
Yes. So the SABC also in 19.2 was going to advertise these events.
Yes, it was.
Yes. Was that permissible?
Yes, it was more promoting that such a story is going to be coming. And that happens across all channels for any different event or matter that would be flighted. Then there would be a showing of what was going to be coming up.
Yes. And in paragraph 21, you repeat what you said in your evidence, that your understanding was that there was not going to be any invoicing that was going to happen.
Yes.
Okay. And then you have some figures that you've put in there in paragraph 23. What are you saying in that paragraph?
In this paragraph, I'm stating that through the investigators from the commission who came to me to discuss this matter, I found out that, in fact, the outdoor broadcast set cost 20,326,000 over a few years. And once again, I do not have the exact detail of how many years this was, but it was over a few years.
Yes.
And I would certainly request that the commission request a clear financial breakdown of these from the SABC.
Yes. And then in paragraph 24, you say that you can confirm that the events did not stay within the contract because then the cost, they suddenly escalated, in certain cases almost doubled. Mm-hmm. And then when this came to your attention, or when you realized that, look, this is no longer what we had agreed on, what steps did you then take?
As I mentioned earlier, I could not intervene on that, except to ask why there were so many suddenly. And I was informed that they were critical. More and more of the major players within government were wanting to present their stories, not only government, SOEs as well, were wanting to be given an opportunity to use the platform to inform the public of their work.
Yes. And you say in paragraph 26 that you understand that another agreement after you had left was concluded.
Yes.
Yes, with TNA News Media.
Yes.
That was on, according to you, what is the date that you highlight there in paragraph 26?
Come again?
In paragraph 26.
Yes.
When was that concluded?
On or about the 20th of February 2015.
Yes. And then you deal with the renewal of the contract. And then in paragraph 30, you say, preceding paragraph, that certain information was brought to your attention by the investigators of the commission.
Yes.
And then could you just tell Chair what you're communicating in paragraph 30?
I really, at no stage during my tenure was I informed or made aware of the fact that TNA Media was in fact charging rather handsome fees from the various state-owned enterprises. I was never made aware.
Yes. So that is them charging this other SOEs for the breakfast shows?
Indeed, Chair. And this had to do with the fact that, as I initially stated, the relationship was completely arm's length. We only came together at the broadcasting and then separated. Anything else that they did beyond that had nothing to do with the SABC. Mm. And that is the reason why somewhere in the statement I do mention that the SABC could not be held liable for anything that TNA was involved in.
Okay. Thank you. And then from paragraph 32 onwards, then you deal with the distribution of the newspapers, that is the New Age.
Yes.
Yes. Could you just testify to those paragraphs, and at what point did you get involved, and to what extent were you involved with the distribution of the New Age within the SABC?
I was never involved with the distribution of the newspapers at all. I was not aware of any contractual arrangement between the newspaper wing of TNA and the SABC. And so I was quite surprised to find, shocked actually, to find that the SABC had been paying for the newspapers to the amount of 930,873 rands. And I found it very difficult to understand that, because my understanding was that the newspapers were being distributed to the SABC just on the basis of the relationship between the SABC and the TNA media wing. The TNA media wing would carry stories about the TNA breakfast. So it made sense that certain newspapers would be distributed to the SABC so the SABC could see how they were being reported on.
Yes.
And there was, as far as I knew, there was no agreement for the exchange of money. So I was once again taken aback when I saw that the SABC was in fact buying the newspapers.
Yes, and the delivery of the newspapers, that have been something that you negotiated on prior to you signing the contract, or advised that it was part of that agreement?
The newspapers had nothing to do with the broadcast contract at all. They were not included. If there was any negotiation, it had to have happened at Mr. Hlaudi Motsoeneng's level and probably Jimmy Matthews. Yes. And I was never involved in that. And I must state that within the delegation of authority framework, an amount of this nature would not at all require permission from me for the expenditure to be incurred.
What was the threshold of matters that had to be referred to you as the Group CEO?
There were, I have this thick document, which is the delegation of authority document.
Yes.
I'm going to try and see very quickly where this could be done.
Did it depend on what the subject matter was? Or it was simply the amount, irrespective of the subject matter?
The threshold that could be expended. For instance, for an amount of this level, it could be approved by a person as low as scale code 300. And a scale code 300 individual would be supervisory level. 125 is general manager, and then above that is media management, and scale code 300 would be supervisory level.
Yes, and matters that would come to you for your approval, could you just give us the
matters
amounts?
that would come to me for my approval would be spending against approved business plans for content acquisitioning or commissioning. And those would be for scale code 110A, which would be myself, and scale code 110, which would be Mr. Motsoeneng and Mr. Tian Olifir's level. And those would be for amounts above 50 million rand.
Yes.
So there was a very clear staggered amounts approval framework, which was quite categoric in how much who could sign for. But I must also state, Chair, that in cases where there was going to be a purchase order, it had to go through, and I would assume that there was a purchase order for the purchasing of these newspapers.
Yeah. In fact, if I may just, to confirm the evidence that was received yesterday from Ms. Yolande van Billion, she mentioned a figure of 991, 671 and 89 cents being the total 2018, 2017, 2016, from 2011 up to 2018. That's basically the figure that she had given.
2011 up to?
From 2011 up to 2018.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So it was for over 7 years?
Yes. 1, 2, 3. Yes, over 7 years. Yes. Thank you. Chair, there's some other, I would like to take the witness to different matters. The parliamentary committee dealings and engagements and their findings, and I would like to take her to some of the matters that they had raised therein. I noticed that it's time for the lunch adjournment. May we adjourn at this point?
How much time do you think those other matters will take?
They are just relevant for the purposes of making sure that at the end of the day we are able to verify certain information from her. They shouldn't take long.
About 15, 30 minutes? Or you are not sure?
I'm not sure, Chair, because there's also the multi-choice and the DTT matters that, yes.
No, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
Let me just ask one or two questions about the newspapers. Were these newspapers that were delivered on a daily basis to SABC that you are talking about?
Chair, I'm not quite sure whether they were delivered daily or as and when there was a specific mention of the SABC. I really am not certain of that. However, if they were being paid for, then they must have been delivered daily.
Yes.
I would assume.
And is it the new age or it was?
The new age.
The new age.
Yes.
Yes. So, so at a certain stage, it did come to attention that the new age was being delivered to SABC.
Yes, and in fact, it would be put on my desk.
It would be put on my desk,
So I was aware
yes.
that they were
But
being
in terms of volumes, did you get to know what volumes you were talking about were being delivered and whether it was just the headquarters of SABC or it was SABC throughout the country?
No, Chair, I was not aware of the volumes, but they would be put at the turnstiles, the entrance,
Yes.
where the staff would go in,
Yes.
and they could pick up a copy when they went in.
So the way it worked, was it that whoever delivered them would put them somewhere and staff members of SABC, as they came in, if they wanted to take a copy, they could take a copy. Is that right?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. And you said that initially, maybe not initially, but initially you thought, or your understanding was that these newspapers were not being paid for by the SABC. Is that right?
Yes, Chair. If there was any payment that was being made during my time, it was certainly concealed from me.
Yes, yes. So initially you thought that they were just giving these newspapers because of the relationship that existed with regard to the breakfast shows.
Yes, Chair.
Yes. But of course that would be strange, would it not, if they were just giving newspapers without expecting payment for them, even if it was because of that relationship with regard to the breakfast shows?
Well, Chair, there is in television language what is called a barter deal, which is where you get something back in kind for whatever little bit that maybe has been done. I assumed they were part of a barter deal. Obviously, not the quantum of the cost of the newspaper obviously being minuscule compared to what was being paid by the SABC to be able to do the, paid for the staff and the OB vans, etc., to be able to do the broadcasts.
So if it was just a few copies, even if it was daily, you would have thought that it was part of of that arrangement.
Yes, Chair.
But
I would
once
have
the
thought that.
volumes reach a certain level, you wouldn't think that, would you? Once the volumes were, it was quite a lot every day that was being delivered and not being paid for.
Chair, I must submit that that is not one of the things that I worried about, that I concerned myself with.
Yes, at the time.
Because I did not think
Yes.
there was anything untoward
Yes,
about the delivery of the newspapers.
yes.
Um,
But as you saw them, did you become aware that it was big volumes that were being delivered, or that you never saw for yourself in terms of where they were being placed and staff saw them as they came in? You never saw what the volumes were, or you just saw the single paper that would be put on your desk each morning?
I saw stacks of papers
Yes.
at the entrance into the office blocks.
Yes,
And then there would be a copy for me on my desk, together
Yes.
with copies from the other newspaper groups that the SABC subscribed to.
yes.
And it never struck me to probe and find out whether we were paying or not paying. Because surely, you know, if we were paying and it was above board, then that information should have been contained in the management accounts that would be issued on a monthly basis. But there was never a line item that I saw in the news management accounts that said what are they called? TNA media newspapers. There was never such a line item.
Well, I would have thought that if the volumes were high and one saw that it looks like on a daily basis there's a big stack of the new age that gets delivered every day like that, unless something similar was happening with other newspapers, you know, that would catch one's attention to say, this is unusual, particularly if anybody can come and just take the newspaper, there's nobody saying pay or anything like that. And that it ought to say to somebody, I hope we are not paying for this, and maybe I would like to know if we are paying for this, or something like that. Is that something that you don't think one would expect to occur?
Well, what I understood from what I was told was that they were being delivered for free.
Yes. Okay, all right. Let's take the adjournment.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll resume at 2:05.
Thank you.
We adjourn.
All rise.
phapha a le re makeng.